When shooting in midday light, trying to conquer that midday light, the first recommendation I have is just get everybody out of the sun. Put people in the shade. It's going to improve your portraits drastically. If you have shade available, put it to use. So I'm going to take a shot of her right now. She's in direct sunlight. It's really contrasty on the face. It kind of rakes across, so it picks up all the textures. It's just unflattering light in general, so let me grab a quick shot. Great. And chin right to me. And so when you look at the shot, overexposed, dark shadows in the eyes, unpleasant in general. So the very easiest solution is find a tree and back her up and put her underneath the tree. So we have you back up like 6 steps. Okay, all she's done is back up in the shade. Take the exact same frame. Beautiful. So now the light has completely changed. Before it was really contrasty, bright highlights, dark shadows. I've stepped her back and it's evened it out and it softened it. Now the one problem that we have with this particular type of shade is that it's open shade. Open shade is when she looks up, there's nothing above her. She's in a shade of a tree, but there isn't an overhang above her. There's not a building. It's literally just open sky, which means that there's still some direction of light. In other words, that open sky, there's light coming from it. And so that's why when you look back at this picture, there are some shadows in the eyes and some highlights in the forehead and nose. So let me shoot, bring your chin down just a little bit. And so the light is still pretty beautiful, especially since we're getting a lot of fill over here from the sidewalk kind of kicking light back in. But it can be improved. We can make this image better by adding a reflector. So what I recommend you do is if she's in the shade and the reflector's in a shade, you can take a white piece of foam core and fill in underneath her chin. And because it's white, it is very subtle. It'll just fill in a little bit, it'll put a little bit of catch lights in the eyes, and it improves the image. So we're going to do one before, and now one after. Good. So if you look at the catch lights in her eyes, they're really subtle. They're just a nice white fill filling in underneath the eyes and a little bit under the chin. It's really beautiful. Now, if you want sharper catch lights and if you want even more fill, you can switch over to a silver reflector. And here I have kind of a 32-inch silver reflector. I'm going to have you put it under her chin first. And since she's in shade, there's no direct sunlight on that reflector, it's okay to put underneath her chin. Now, if she's standing in the sun or you're catching the light from the sun back here, you don't want to hold it down low because it's going to kick highlights underneath her chin and underneath her nose. So right there is fine. Beautiful. And so you have a little brighter catch light, that's gorgeous, in her eye, and it looks like she's glowing. Great. Beautiful. So you'll see much more defined catch lights than if we use just a piece of foam core. Now, this is great if I'm trying to just fill in the light in her eyes, but what happens if I want to give a little more illumination to her entire body? Or if I want to make her pop out from the background? This solution isn't going to work by just trying to kick light in the shade. You don't really have that much control. I mean, especially if you look, trying to light her body, you barely see any light at all. So if I want to illuminate the entire body, kick more light back into her eyes, we have to find a different solution. So the solution that I would use would be you take a larger reflector. You're going to use a larger reflector and you're going to back up. And the reason you do that is if you use a large reflector right up close, it's going to have really bright highlights close to her. Whereas if you back up, it diffuses those highlights and spreads it out more evenly across the body. So you don't want to be up close and low, kicking up underneath the eyes. You want to bring the reflector back, hold it up at a high angle, and that's going to improve the quality of light. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have you hold the reflector correctly. So he's holding the reflector the way I would want it to be shot. So give me a little motion in your body. Beautiful. Right there. Okay, drop the reflector for one so I can see without. No reflector at all. Okay. All right, so if you look at the quality of light between the two, the before picture, it's nice, but there's not a lot of contrast. She doesn't pop from the background. In the picture with a little bit more light, in this instance, we've used a 3 by 4 foot silver gold mix. So that image, by using a silver gold mix, it's a little bit warmer, and because it's specular, in other words, it's shiny, it's going to give you more contrast when you fill. So what you want to stay away from is you don't want to reflect from down here. So come in really close and reflect from a low angle. Okay, you don't want to do that. Now let me show you why. Look right at me. If you look at her face, it's over illuminated, it's overfilled. By shooting at a low angle, first of all, he's catching a lot of light, so it's overexposing the face. The other thing is that you'll actually see that the shadows from her nose are cast upwards. You don't want that. It's not flattering to the face. It creates an awkward shadow underneath her eye. So instead, you want to catch the light not from down here, but hold the reflector up and catch the reflector, catch the light from a high angle. So do that one more time. Stay right there. Catch the light from low and look straight at me with your eyes. And now hold that and catch one up high. Beautiful. So it's much nicer. The other thing you want to be aware of, what people tend to do is they say, okay, I want to add some light to that photograph. So they take a reflector and try to kick as much light in as possible. And it looks almost like unpleasant flash, or it looks really contrasty, you have really defined shadows. It's not pleasing. That's what people do when they say, oh, I want to reflect, they catch all the light. You don't actually want to use your reflector at full power. It's just like in the studio. Maybe you have a big softbox and you don't necessarily want it straight onto the subject. You can pull it off the side and use an edge of that softbox. So instead of using your reflector at full power, catching as much light as possible, you want to turn it at an angle and just watch so that it's more of a subtle fill. So I'll actually go, okay, put the reflector at full power, kick as much light in as possible. Good. And now back it off a little bit. And so he's just going to kick in with the edge of it. And he literally, I'm just having the reflector moving it side to side. So instead of catching as much light as possible, once you have that full reflector, you just kind of wiggle it back and forth. Honestly, it's by your eye. It's what looks best. So right now, this reflector isn't overpowering the light on the face. It's giving me a nice catch light and just filling in the shadows in the eyes. Beautiful. Great. Good. A silver reflector is going to give you kind of more of a neutral fill. A silver gold, like we have here, is going to warm up the image. If you want just a subtle fill with a little bit of catch light, you can flip it around and you can have a white reflector. And so a white reflector, you do need to be in closer. So have you come up just a little bit, and I'm going to do before and after. Great, let's see right there. And take a half step back. Having her take a half step back because when she stepped forward, I started to get some sunlight on the face. Beautiful. So I'm going to have you do before and after. Here's after. Do one more. And now before, drop it for me. Good. So the biggest difference you'll see is the catch lights in the eyes. But the catch lights are kind of the window to the soul. It helps you connect with your subject. It gives more energy and it's more flattering to have catch lights. So if I need to add a reflector, even if it's not to change the quality or direction of light on the face, it's nice to add a catch light. There are different reflectors for different purposes. Here I have a silver reflector and I'm kicking it back to illuminate the model. When we're close and using a silver reflector, one of the problems that I tend to find is that it will create a highlight only on one part of the body. So right here, for example, it's only catching light on her hands. And if I kick it up towards her face, then we only get the face and not her hands. So it creates uneven illumination. I can back her up. Back up even more. And I can try to kick a little bit of light in, but since it's a small reflector, I'm not getting that much fill. So my solution would be to kick over to a larger reflector. And so if I stand back and I have my reflector from a further distance, because it's larger and because it's a rectangle, instead of having a circle that'll only kick kind of a spotlight of light, maybe at her hands or her chest or her face, having a rectangle is going to give me more even illumination head to toe. So for me, if I'm photographing a single person where I just want the face, I might use foam core or a silver reflector, one of the silver round reflectors. If I'm trying to photograph a group or a large number of people or a full length shot, I'll switch over to a larger rectangular reflector. This is the California Sunbounce 3x4 foot mini zebra. I also have a 4x6 foot when I'm photographing a large group. For a large group, again, big reflector, back way up. How I like to think about it is if I'm photographing a group of people and my light is in a bucket of water, we'll kind of think of it as a bucket of water. If I take a bucket and I throw it really close to the subject, it might only hit here, right? It might only hit her face if I'm throwing that water. If I back up really far and toss that same bucket of water, it has more time to spread out evenly over the subject. It's the same thing when photographing a group of people. If I have a reflector in nice and close, it might only hit one person, so I'm going to back it up. But if I have a small reflector, it might not be able to catch, basically a small bucket, it might not be enough light or enough water to cover everybody, so that's why I switch over to a larger reflector. Those are the two main reflectors that I use for lighting portraits.